Alrighty, so let's take a look at a couple of practice questions similar to those that you might see on a test with this stuff. So we're talking about finding the restrictions for a radical expression here. So we're going to again look at ways to identify values where we're undefined and how we restrict the domain to make sure that everything is going to actually be defined. Okay, so here's the first question. Multiple choice, not too bad. What are the restrictions on x for the expression 17 divided by the square root of x minus 2? So what we're getting at here is they kind of want you to look at the fact that we know it's going to have something to do with x being around 2, but if this is going to work out to be something that's sensible, would x have to be a negative or 0, a positive or 0, or strictly positive? So we got to look specifically at what the expression says. So if I have 17 over the square root of x minus 2, the first thing I should notice is that this is a fraction, so the x minus 2 that's in the denominator here, we got to make a note that x minus 2 is never going to be allowed to be equal to 0, because if we're equal to 0, we're in big trouble. So right away, we can throw away the stuff that says we're allowed to be equal to 2. So this one is going to be out, and this one is going to be out. So B and C are already eliminated. But you wouldn't really even have to note that. If you're going to look at this as an expression, and we're going to use an inequality to solve it, all we have to do is say the stuff inside the root, x minus 2, we know it's a square root, so it has to turn out to be positive, and we're not allowed to equal 0. So we're just going to say strictly greater than 0. So a quick flick of the 2 to the other side of that inequality, adding 2 to both sides, and we get x has to be strictly greater than 2. So the only option for us here is D. Okay? Let's roll on to the next question. Now this one says to explain why the restrictions on the variable x are different for each of the given expressions. So you see we have three very similar expressions here, but we're going to have different restrictions on the value of x for each one. So let's talk about what the restrictions are and why they are the way they have to be for each of these. So for the first one that we have here, it's just square root of 2x plus 6. For that expression, we don't have to worry about division by 0. It's only the square root business. So the stuff that's inside there, which is the 2x plus 6, the radicand, can be a positive number or it can be 0, and we'd still be okay. So in this case, we're going to say that 2x is allowed to be greater than or equal to a negative 6 if we subtract 6 from both sides, and then dividing by 2, we'd say that x could be greater than or equal to negative 3. Okay? So it's because of this restriction right here that x can be greater than or equal to negative 3. So that's how you would explain that sort of in words. And then for the next one, it's the same idea, same expression, only in this case, I'm not going to be allowed to include that equals 0 here, because if I'm equal to 0 here, I'm going to end up with a 1 divided by 0, and that's a no-no. So what we're going to say is we're going to have to say 2x plus 6 in this case is strictly greater than 0. So I subtract the 6 again, and I have 2x is strictly greater than negative 6, meaning that x is strictly greater than a negative 3 when we put that together. So those are the restrictions on the first two that we have. Okay? So in this case, it's because we don't want to allow division by 0. Now on the last one, notice that we're dealing with a cube root. So in this case, because we're dealing with a cube root, negatives are a non-issue. So they're okay for this one. So the only thing we have to worry about here, in fact, is the division by 0. So the stuff underneath the radicand there, or the radicand itself, I should say, not underneath it, the stuff underneath the radical, which is the radicand, is all right as long as it's not equal to 0. So if 2x plus 6 can't equal 0, 2x is not allowed to be equal to negative 6, and then by the same token, x can't be equal to negative 3. So those are our restrictions. So we've got similar, but very slightly different restrictions for all of those based on the type of inequality sign we end up with, and those are all determined sort of by where that stuff is in the expression. Okay? So again, be careful. If you have an even root, can't have a negative number, no 0 denominators allowed, and use an inequality, and you'll always be safe when you find your restrictions. Okay, hope that helps. See you in the next session.